Saul Colt is my guest. He's the CEO and founder of the Idea Integration Company. He is one of the world's greatest word of mouth marketers. And I will spare you the rest of the bio because I'm hoping that we dig into all of that as we chat. First question, I know you like to start a podcast already in progress. What was the kid version of Saul like?
So, the kid version of me is not so different than the adult version of me. I don't know if I've ever fully grown up. I think I've softened over the years, but it wasn't that different. I always liked attention. I don't think I really understood personal branding or anything like that, but I always dressed a little bit differently. I'm sure a lot of people probably just thought I was gay as a kid or something. I loved bright. I loved colors. I loved things. And I didn't know I wanted to be a marketer. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just knew from a very early age the importance of not being invisible, the importance of standing out, the power of boldness. And I've always worn crazy clothes. I've always loved sneakers, loud glasses. I think part of it was confidence, part of it was defense mechanism. If you could control what people looked at, if they're looking at my shoes, they weren't looking at my belly, sort of thing. I could always control how people saw me. And that sort of taught me a bunch of early marketing lessons before I knew they were even marketing lessons. That's literally what brands are trying to do all the time: direct attention, shape perception, give people a reason to notice you and things like that. And I think I was just doing it subconsciously. And as I grew and read and learned and things like that, I formalized it and made it about attention mechanics and things like that.
You're into answering my next question, which was going to be like, when did you realize that some of those things that maybe even developed as defense mechanisms were building the greatest word of mouth marketer on the planet? What flipped in your mind when you realized, hey, maybe this is me?
I don't think it ever really clicked until I started working and understood. Like, I think it probably clicked around the same time, one of the early people on social media. And then I understood the importance of having a persona or a character or a hook before people talked about things like hooks. And so I don't know if I ever made it subconscious effort during high school or anything like that. I think it was just more of a thing as I got older and understood things a little better. It clicked for me. And I will tell you, I've spoken about this many times, but a lot of people still don't know this about me. Before I became who I am today, whatever that means to people, I grew up in a family business, and it was a very my family business was corrugated box manufacturing. So not very creative, not very inspiring, we'll say, not very forward thinking. A lot of ways it stifled me because I was trying to break free as a creative person. That's always been sort of part of me. And so one of the things I did was a side hustle before they were called side hustles was I started a comic book publishing company. I always loved movies and entertainment were some of my favorite things. And I've got a gray beard. I'm not a kid. And when I was in high school, you couldn't just make a movie with your iPhone or anything like that. You needed 50, 60, $70,000. So I started making what I called paper films, like movies in comic books, and started telling my stories. And we actually did pretty well. I fed myself for a decade and built a real business. But the reason I was able to build a real business is because I grew up in a family business, because my dad taught me everything I knew. I wasn't treating my comic book company as a hobby. I was treating it like a business right from day one. And almost everything I'm known for now as a marketer, my foundations, my everything, I developed in my comic book publishing days because I wasn't a classically trained marketer at that time. I've certainly become one since then, but I was selling a black and white, irreverent, satirical superhero comic book with characters nobody knew for $1 more than they could buy Batman and Superman. And I was actually doing okay. And the reason I was doing okay is there were no rules to marketing this thing. We created scavenger hunts at comic book conventions. We released press releases like we were Marvel Comics. I was reaching out to morning shows like breakfast television and all these people to really make this a thing. And so much so that our books were available in 5 countries. We had things optioned for movies. We had all sorts of things because I had the foundation of a business person and I didn't follow any marketing rules. And that's been the red line through my entire career is where everyone's going left, I go right and play by no rules. Now I have a lot of rules, but my rules are still so different than everyone else's rules that it still seems like they're crazy and ridiculous and maverick-like. But really, it all started from my comic book days where I knew that if I didn't make this work, I was going to starve to death. And as you can see, I haven't missed many meals over the last 30, 40 years, so I've been doing okay. Although I am trying to miss some meals now. I want to get really like thin and hot. I want to be like the East Coast, like Jordan. Yeah, so there you go. That's my origin story.
Awesome. I want to kind of continue because we're into the essence of what makes Saul. And I want to cue up a story from around the time that we met. I'm just going to utter a sentence, and this is going to cue up the anecdote. The sentence is, there's always money in the banana stand.
Yeah, so it's one of the few things that I'm most known for. It's like usually at the top of the list. It's one of the things I'm most proud of. And it goes back to what I said about there are no rules. That instead of saying why, you should really be saying why not to a lot of things. The banana stand idea is I was given 3 weeks to a last minute thing to exhibit for Fresh Books and online voicing platform. We were going to go to a financial services conference, and financial services conference, it's all about trust. It's all about big giant budgets for your booth and convey that you're the person that they should be working with. And one, at FreshBooks, we didn't have the money to invest in a giant booth. Two, it wasn't really our brand. And three, I just thought it was a dumb idea. How do you do something that's going to be memorable? How do you do something that people are going to talk about? How do you do something that people are going to take pictures of and really draw people into your booth? And the answer was I built a 10-foot high, 8 or 9, 10 feet high banana stand, exact replica of the one from Arrested Development, the Bluth banana stand. There's always money in the banana stand. That's how we worked our way into a financial services conference. Instead of giving away pens or mouse pads or beer koozies, whatever people give away at conferences, we gave away 2,000 bananas. Each banana had a unique URL sticker on it. Instead of it saying Del Monte, it had FreshBooks logo and a short link and things like that. And because the booth was so different, people would tell everybody that you've got to go see this booth because we were giving away bananas. People would come back every day because we were, just because everything was so unusual and unlike what people were accustomed to seeing. It completely changed the way people looked at our brand compared to anyone else. When I created the banana stand, it was always about fun, but fun only gets you so far. Fun has to actually make money. Fun has to change people's minds. When you build campaigns, at this one, I was asking myself, how would I make someone stop? How would I make them smile or react? How would I make them tell someone about it? And how would we also make people want to know what we're doing, want to know why they should be working this, and all sorts of things? And this was the early days of the foundation of Laugh, Think, Cry. I don't think I had completely formalized it yet, but I have two foundations that I run every question through. And I know you'll probably ask me about it later, so I'm not going to go too deep in them right now, but I have a formulation of how I come up with ideas, and then I have a formulation of how I vet if the idea is any good or not. And how I vet if it's a good idea or not is I ask myself, will this make people laugh? Will this make people think? And will this make people cry? Cry is a short form for creating an emotional response to something. And if you're only making someone laugh, it's not the best idea. If you're only making someone do one of the three, you got to do a little bit more work. If you're making people do two of the three, it's probably a good idea. And if you're making people do all three, it's a killer idea. And I really knew that this was a killer idea because it really did touch all three buckets of laugh, think, cry. And one of the things I don't tell a lot of people about is we were so strapped for budget at the time. I had the banana stand made in San Diego where the conference was that we were going to, so we didn't have to ship it. And we didn't even really have budget to ship it back to Toronto to our office. So in our booth, we also had a contest to win the banana stand. And this is about 10 years ago, probably, maybe 12 years ago. But every time in San Francisco, I go knock on the door because I know exactly where my banana stand is. And every time people come into the lobby of that office, they tell the story of how they got the banana stand. They tell the story of FreshBooks. And I have no idea how many sales just giving away our banana stand has generated, but I could tell you, having it in that booth, 62% of all the people that got a banana went to our URL. They tried the product. They went further with us. So when you do take chances and when you do become over creative, it does pay off all the time. You always go back to a Colt 45 malt liquor. It works every time. Kind of like a bottle of malt liquor.
I love these anecdotes, turning the bug of I can't shift the banana stand back into the feature of win the banana stand.
Yeah.
I want to get into what does that creative process look like? You said you had 3 weeks, which I guess isn't a ton of time to prepare something like that, especially if you're the person building the banana stand.
Mhm.
But when Saul is coming up with the concept for this idea, you talked through a little bit about the questions you ask yourself, but what is the ideal state or what do the conditions have to be for a quote unquote lightning to strike and for you to come up with an idea like that one or like the many others that we could be talking about?
So I'll say that there's so many different ways that I don't have a formula where it's like the room has to be dark or there needs to be music playing or something like that. I think that that's where people get, I think, a little lost and stuff like that. I think one of the things, like there are many things that I do and many things, but it's less about the situation and it's more about my brain thought process and things like that. And I'll tell you, most companies and a lot of companies, they get it wrong all the time, but it's companies and people will say they don't have a creativity problem. They have a formula problem, or they have creativity isn't magic, it's a system. The best ideas come from inspiration, but they also come from volume and structure. Bad marketers or bad creative people wait for ideas. Good ones generate 100 and pick 3 and 4 of the best ones. Creativity is trainable. I wrote the book on this and I'll hold it up here. There we go. Go buy my book.
That was gonna be one of my last questions, of course. We're gonna come back to that.
All right, but the foundation of how I work when I'm coming up with ideas is called the Wombat system. And it's actually, I did not create this. I created Laugh, Think, Cry, but Wombat is actually something that was designed and still used today by the CIA. And what it is, it's a reframing of thinking. So a lot of people, when they say, oh my God, I've got to come up with an idea to display at a conference in 3 weeks, what am I going to do? How can we display at this conference? What are the best conference ideas? And Wombat, which stands for what might be all the, and it's a different way of creating ideas. So it's what might be all the ways we can get people's attention. What might be all the ways we can have the most active booth at the conference? What might be all the ways we can get 300 people to sign up? And what you do is you start creating hundreds of ideas, good, bad, and indifferent. And once you have all these ideas, you start drilling down and drilling down. So a lot of 3 bad ideas make 1 good idea and so forth. So a lot of people give up after 3 ideas, 4 ideas, 5 ideas. I find that sometimes our best ideas don't come until we're at idea 30 or 40 and things like that. And it's not that marketing and creativity fails because it's wrong. It fails because it's forgettable. And it's like nobody remembers 90% of ads. Nobody remembers 90% of concepts, ideas, not because they're bad. It's because they're invisible. So when you say what might be all the ways, you're not limiting yourself in any way to come up with an abundance of ideas. And then once you pick the ones that you think are the best, So I would never have come up with the banana stand idea if I had said to myself, okay, what are best practices for doing a great conference booth? Or what's a way to get people to stop and pick up our candy or whatever? It's really about what are all the ways that I can create such an experience that we're going to be the most talked about booth at the show and we're going to get on CNN because we were on CNN because we did have the best booth. It's 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 never about luck. It's always about engineering. It's never about we hope this goes viral because that's like saying we hope we accidentally make money. You have to give people something worth talking about. You have to make it easy to share. You have to reward participation emotionally, not just financially. And that comes from going through the Wombat sort of formula because the more you limit yourself, you're never going to land on an idea that someone's going to remember a decade later.
I love that insight, and that's actually a trick I'm going to use. If somebody asked me that same question, I would just say something flippant. My ideas always come to me when I'm taking a shower or a shit. But having that methodology of throwing good ideas down.
I'll say, I believe I'm blessed that I am creative and my brain works in such a way that I don't limit myself. So I can come up with a crazy number of ideas in a short amount of time. But Wombat and Laugh Think Cry are for people who aren't naturally creative, who need a jump start, who want to be more creative, who want to be more successful in their boardroom or their brainstorming session. They want to stand out to their boss. I've been doing this for 30 years now. I just outed myself. I can't date 20-year-olds anymore. But this is how I've trained myself that I do it instinctively. But following these formulas, anybody could do it. And I truly believe it.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit because there's an era of your career where you're the man on the inside of the large corporation, the Rogers and Zero. And I want to talk about what is it like to be that creative spark inside the giant corporate behemoth. Was there tension there with ideas maybe dying on the vine because they can't make it past committee? This is a very leading question, I realize, but it almost feels like that's a mismatch for the Saul that we know.
So I will say this. My time at Rogers and my time at Zero was an absolute mismatch, but I would not be having the career I have now if I didn't go through that process. And the same could be said for FreshBooks. FreshBooks was the best thing of my career because it gave me absolute freedom to be myself and run free and do amazing things almost unchecked because I had proven myself that what I wanted to do worked and it gave them the results they were looking for. Rogers, and I am going to answer your question. I just want to ramble a little bit ahead of time. Rogers was the place that taught me structure. So I came in working for myself, working for startups, and they said, hey, you're so great. That's why we want you here. But you have no clue how to be in a meeting or anything like that. But so we're actually going to teach you that. So I am so loyal and respectful towards Rogers, even though I was not a good fit. But man, I love that company, which not very many people say because it helped me in so many ways. But they also, once I earned their trust, let me be myself too and let me do some crazy things under the red and white banner. But at the same time, I think 2 years there, I just overstayed my welcome and moved on. But that being said, I have done 3 returns with them, or 3 total returns with them, where 1 was a full-time and 2 as a consultant. So they still see a little bit of value in me. And I love helping them because I am very grateful for the time they invested in me. But I will say, and the same be said for Zero. Zero was a very different situation, but still they let me be me. And everything is just going from a publicly traded company to a very high growth company with publicly traded aspirations. Both are very sensitive and delicate, are very sensitive to certain things just in different ways. But I will say this, it's very easy to just say, oh, big companies, they're slow to adapt or they're slow to move. And that's why someone like me would be suffocated within those brands. But I will say that the problem isn't that these companies are slow. And even the problem isn't that big companies don't have good ideas. There's really smart people in big companies. It's that not a lot of big companies are built to protect those ideas. But when you need 19 people to sign off on something crazy, every layer adds more risk aversion. Every stakeholder has something more to lose. Nobody owns bold decisions, but everyone can veto them. I remember not Rogers or Zero, but I remember pitching a very large, recognizable Canadian entity. And the CEO said, "This is exactly what we should be doing, but we're not going to work with you." And I don't understand. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm not going to say who it is, so no one's going to get in trouble. But he said, I make about 300 a year. And if what you do for us works, that's great, but it doesn't actually help me a whole lot. And if what you do really hurts our business, I probably get fired and I'm not going to find another job so quickly making 300 a year. So it's better for me personally to not work with you. And we'll grow the company 2-3% a year and everyone's going to be happy as long as we're not losing money. You might be able to grow it 5 to 10% a year, but there's also a chance that everything doesn't work. So I'm just not going to take the chance. And that's when I kind of learned that in big companies, ideas don't fail loudly. They die quietly in meetings. And that was like a huge learning for me because the legal team could soften it, the brand waters it down, leadership asks for just one more version, and suddenly it's safe and invisible. And I would say, and it's a horrible thing to say out loud, but the best way to get bold ideas through at a big company is not to pitch them as bold, it's to make them feel small and reversible. But a lot of that comes from being willing to get fired. If somebody says, you told us it was one thing and it was something completely different. So yeah, I always hear people in big companies romanticize being an entrepreneur and owning their own thing and running their own thing. And I think it's, people with curly hair want to have straight hair and people with freckles don't want to have freckles or whatever. People dream of being in my position where I want to be the VP of a bank or something like that and still do my own stuff and show people that you can be bold in a giant organization and it's not going to hurt you or anything, but going in and having all those layers and not being a high level decision maker, it's always been difficult for me.
When did you realize that your reputation was such a key part of your identity? I want to reference the fact that your YouTube channel is called The Smartest Man in the World. You named that for yourself. So I'll repeat the question. At what point did you realize that your reputation was becoming part of your identity?
Once I learned about personal branding when I was beginning in my career, I really invested heavily in it. I've given out 500 to 800 t-shirts with my face on it. I've had chocolate coins made with my face on them. I've got pins, stickers, all sorts of things, jackets, hats. I believe I'm the best in the world at what I do. I don't believe there's anyone close to what I do. But if people don't know me, none of that matters. So half of my whole struggle as an independent agency owner is just being remembered. I had a person reach out to me, an inbound lead, whatever you want to call it, but they said, I've been trying to find a way to work with you for 10 years. So, man, that's powerful. It's like, I've always thought of my career as my most important asset. It's been the best and worst thing for me in my entire life because it's opened up 100,000 doors for me, but it's also closed, 200,000 doors for me. I've had people tell me they wouldn't work with me because I had, I don't know if you remember the Burt Reynolds nude picture from Cosmopolitan, but Burt Reynolds is lying on a bearskin rug. His penis is tucked in between his legs. You don't see anything, but he's completely naked. And so I recreated that whole picture because I just thought it was funny. And that used to be my Facebook cover image. And I've had people literally take a meeting with me, sign the contract to work together, and then say, we can't work with you because we saw your Facebook wall and you're too much of a hot potato. And I was like, why are they calling me a potato? I know I'm like the East Coast Jordan Fahan. But so like my career has been one thing, but because I speak my mind and because I don't hide the fact that I like nudity and because I talk about some topics that people don't necessarily agree with, I've donated my time several times to charities like Planned Parenthood. I'm about women's rights and I love abortion and all sorts of things. I'm putting myself out there that I think people know who to call me and who shouldn't call me. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable, I think, working with a certain level of brand that I can't even think of anybody right now, but I've turned down a bunch of projects because it didn't feel good. But it's like I've also worked with Doc Johnson, who's North America's largest sex toy manufacturer, and I had the greatest time on that project and stuff like that. So it's because I'm letting people know what they're getting themselves into with working with me, people aren't going to call me up unaware of what the experience might be like. And I'll tell you, I recorded a podcast yesterday.
I read about this morning, by the way. Your newsletter was about this.
Yeah. So, and this guy made a big deal and basically called me Satan and told me that I need Jesus in my life and all sorts of things. And I'm cool with like, I don't want this person not to believe what they want. And I'm not trying to convince them I'm a good or bad person or anything. I'm talking about marketing. But it's like, I think I made a joke about being naked or something and an older gentleman, and good for them. I'm not going to attack them or out them or any of that nonsense, but he knows not to call me and I'm okay with that and stuff like that. So, but getting back to the original question, I think personal branding is so important because it's really like when I hire, and I've hired 100 people over the course of my career, whenever I look at resumes, I know there's dozens and dozens of people who could do the job. So a lot of times the last thing that goes into the final decision is like, would you want to spend 6 hours sitting next to this person on a plane? And so I just put my real me out there so people know that this is what it's going to be like sitting for 6 hours on a plane. And if I'm memorable, which is my number one goal in life, they're going to call me when they need me because it's always been, I probably said this already, but I'm just rolling. My goal has always been about being the world's best at a small sliver of a skill set. I don't want you calling me for SEO. I don't want you calling me for web development and stuff like that. It's not what you call me for. So I want to make it crystal clear why everybody knows why and when they should call to reach out to me.
Excellent. In that newsletter that I was reading this morning, where you're telling the story about the feedback, the unsolicited feedback that you got from this particular gentleman, you tied it back to the fact that there are like good marketing is somewhat polarizing. It creates insiders and outsiders. So I just want to pull on that thread a little bit.
Yeah. So I've always said that if I have one superpower, it's knowing how far you can go with something before you really offend people and hurt their feelings. And what I always subscribe is you go to that line and you take 2 baby steps over it, because those 2 baby steps are where the magic happens. That's where the memorability is baked into. Every great campaign should feel like an inside joke. It should be like something like you're the only one who gets it. I don't know if you watch the TV show The Boys. It's like the last season.
Early seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the craziest, most ridiculous show on television. No, whatever, but I think so interesting.
Your take on the, sorry to interrupt, but here's my take on The Boys is that it started as something that was, what's that movie too? Starship Troopers, where it's like you're lampooning the idea of something that is so crazy, and yet you just wait long enough and then it becomes real life.
That's definitely what they're going to
like
do.
having a difficult time being ridiculous enough without getting into too much. But anyways, go on.
The reason I mentioned The Boys is at the end of every episode, if you go to YouTube, there's 5 videos of here's every joke you didn't get or every Easter egg you missed and everything. They're baking so much into that cake or whatever cliche you want to use that you have to pay attention. And that's what great marketing is. It's you bake something so dense that people have to pay attention. You're grabbing their attention. And if it's not for them, that's fine. Like I said to on this podcast the other day, I said that I don't try to go after people who aren't going to buy my product. I try to make sure the people who are buying my product love this product and bring 5 of their friends, because it's always cheaper and easier to get new customers from your existing customers and find 5 brand new people. And they were pushing back and saying, isn't that just marketing, finding new people? Yeah, it's new people. But if you don't know who your customers are, you've got probably a targeting issue more than a product issue. So I was trying to explain, and it was a bit of a different audience than I'm used to. I'm not sure that they were a marketing audience. Very nice people, very smart, but it's like they didn't really grasp, or I maybe wasn't explaining it properly, but there's so much gold in your current customer body that they can keep your business growing, doubling every year by just being good to them and asking for introductions and asking for referrals and all sorts of things. If you're just going out looking for net new people, you always have to be looking for net new people. But man, if you build something really for insiders, they're going to happily bring their friends along because it's made just for them, or at least it should feel like it's made just for them.
The Idea Integration Company, that's the current iteration of Saul. And I'm fascinated by the decision to hire Bill Morrison and so many of the writers and creative team from Mad Magazine. It's very on brand for you, but it's also out of left field. It's super, I don't know, you call it analog, and a totally underrated move. So tell me about that.
Okay, you say it's the current iteration, but we're going into our 18th year of business. The Idea Integration Company started because I was tired of seeing good brands do boring marketing. And a lot of agencies out there, they optimize for approval, where I think we optimize for reaction. And we don't think channel first, we think idea first. We're very entertainment focused. And it's like we're all about creating the best ideas and getting them to spread and doing it with the best people, because channels don't make things spread, ideas do. And the whole Mad Magazine thing started because I mentioned earlier in our conversation that I used to run a comic publishing company. I did it for a decade. And through those years, I made some wonderful friends, and one of them is Bill. And Bill was employee number 1 at The Simpsons. I've known Bill for probably 20 years, and we've always talked about working together. And Bill left The Simpsons probably, I don't know, I'm really bad with timelines, but let's say 5 or 6 years ago. And the only reason he left was he was offered the job as editor-in-chief of Mad Magazine. And he did that for 2 years, and then Warner Brothers decided to stop publishing Mad Magazine. They shuttered it, and Bill was in town doing an autograph signing, and whenever he was in town, he would always come over for dinner, and we were just talking, and I was asking him what he was doing, and this was like the first couple of months of COVID, and he was like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do right now. And my company during COVID, we struggled immensely. We almost went out of business, and we had to pivot from doing in real world stunts and activities and rethink everything we've been doing for the last decade and a bit. And it's funny, we're having dinner, and I said to Bill, I go, if there's anyone I can think of to introduce you to, I'm happy to do that. And I drove him back to his hotel, and I'm like thinking, like, I'm such an idiot. Like, why am I going to introduce you to people when I should just take the jump and figure out a way for us to work together? And we started talking, and it took about 6 months or so. And we just kept bringing more and more people over from Mad Magazine and The Simpsons, because these were incredibly talented people that, for the most part, were freelancers for the first time in their lives and didn't really know how to be freelancers. So this was like a soft landing for them. It elevated our presence, gave us what I think is still one of the best creative teams anywhere. A few people have retired and churned out, and we pick and chose from the very best, and have developed a bit of a smaller but really amazing core team from the original sort of wave of people that came in. And I wouldn't say it's analog in any way, because besides the fact these people could do animation and all sorts of stuff, and we've built like a full video production department out of this, it's like we have a team that understands culture, not just campaigns. When you think of Mad Magazine, it's always been about, and The Simpsons, it's always been about holding up a mirror to society. And that's what advertising and marketing is all about. So it's never been about where should this idea go? It's always about why should anyone care? And when you're trying to figure out, will this make anyone care? That's a culture question. That's a society question. That's a human question, not a technology question.
Should we be having a moment of silence for the loss of Mad Magazine? I'm going to say maybe I'm hopeful that you'll agree here, but I think that any excuse for eliminating Mad Magazine from the zeitgeist is not a good enough excuse. It's probably some sort of a number in a ledger or some bullshit. But that, and I watched the documentary, and I agree that it was a formative thing for a person of a certain culture, us little weirdos flipping through a book that we saw ourselves in. And that doesn't exist anymore. And I do not accept any reason why it should not continue to exist.
So technically, it still does exist because to keep the trademarks and to keep everything, they do have to keep putting out, I think they put out one book a year. It's just a collection of, they'll put out Mad about superheroes, and it'll be all the superhero stories from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that they created. And maybe there's a brand new cover or something like that. But the Mad team is just one intern at this point. Is it a shame? Absolutely. Mad is one of the most important, I'd say, creation for young boys that's ever happened, and even girls. But so many people learn their taste and sense of humor from Mad Magazine. This is not my observation. I wish I'd come up with this, but a friend of mine, a guy named Jason Rodriguez, when Mad announced that they were shuttering, he tweeted, and I screen grabbed it and I've shared it every couple of years, but he said that nobody who's, I'm paraphrasing it, nobody who's sad about Mad closing really understands how important it was, because you're not a 14-year-old kid, and Mad taught you sarcasm. Mad taught you to question everything. Mad shaped you and got you prepared for early adulthood and stuff like that. And people just don't understand that, because nothing has taken its place. And there's nothing today that, unless it's just the hatred on Reddit or something. I don't know who's raising boys anymore, but I don't remember the term incel when I was 14 years old and stuff like that. So maybe Mad did make us all okay.
I was one of those kids that bought it, and yeah, probably learned a certain amount of, like you said, questioning everything and a bit of cynicism. And yeah, I think that it's a shame that it doesn't exist anymore. Now, granted, I wasn't running out to newsstands and buying it anymore, but I'm no longer a 14-year-old boy, so I don't think I could defend that. But yeah, the fact that the 14-year-old boys of today aren't folding in the back cover or reading a Spy versus Spy comic. Weep for humanity, Saul. It's bloody well not fair.
I agree.
You and I had a conversation. I don't typically do a pre-call or whatever, but I was rebranding my podcast. And so we met last week or a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I asked you about the new brand for my podcast. I want to call it The Torch, the idea of passing the torch and legacy and so on. And so I want to transition into questions in that vein. And I want to know, what parts of your career do you think are most worth passing on to maybe the younger generation? What do the 14-year-old boys of today need to learn from Saul, while Saul still has the energy to fold court and teach us?
Maybe I'm mishearing the question. I don't think there's parts of my career, but there's certainly lessons I've learned along the way, which, and I'll say, and it's hard to really predict how AI and things are going to change in the next few years. But I will say, and I've shared a couple lessons that I've learned along the way, and especially for my time in big companies. But one thing that was very valuable for me to learn, and I learned this later, I didn't really learn this early, but there's a massive gap between what brands say they want and how they behave. When you think brands, they say, we want attention. And then you show them what it takes to get attention, and they say, let's not offend anybody. Even if it's not offensive, what you're trying to say, it's like, we're trying to be everything to everybody. And that's what I wrote, what we talked about already about insiderism. But safe marketing doesn't fail, it just vanishes. Algorithms, they reward for engagement, but people reward boldness. Culture rewards originality. Safe brands, they get ignored, they get outperformed, they get forgotten. And that's something that I try to drill in. Like every talk I give, every conversation, everything, it's like the biggest risk in marketing isn't failure, it's being ignored. We've trained entire teams to avoid mistakes instead of creating impact. And that's like one of the things that drives me crazy, because it's like we growth hacking and, commerce and data analytics and performance marketing. You can performance market yourself right out of a brand. And people think they just have to keep tuning and tuning and tuning. But shopping cart abandonment emails don't start conversations, and buy one, get one freeze and things like that don't start conversations. It's about connection. It's just, there's so many things brands get wrong because they're playing it safe. And I always tell people that it's like the reason you should do word of mouth, the reason you should be bold is if it doesn't catch fire, it just means nobody saw it. Very few people get their jobs lost or things like that by doing word of mouth when it's done properly and it's engineered by a professional like myself. It causes problems when people just think they know what they're doing and they don't do it properly and they go on crazy. I talked about 2 baby steps over the line. 10 real steps is how you get fired. 2 baby steps is how you create a real cultural movement and moment.
Just hearing you talk about that, I came up with another question. There's this phenomenon that seems to happen every time a company does a rebrand, especially a bold one, where there is just a massive dust up and everybody comes out of the woodwork to share their opinions on. I could provide examples, but it happens just about every single rebrand.
Yeah, Cracker Barrel, all this stuff.
Jaguar, exactly. And Cracker Barrel, it's actually probably the perfect example because it wasn't necessarily what I would consider to be bold in terms of their decision making. Barely anything changed, and then they reverted back because of blowback on it. I'd just like to hear your take on that as somebody who isn't responsible for those rebrands, but in the cases where, in effect, in a way, that's evidence of it working when it does start those conversations. The question is, why does that happen? Why do people come out of the woodwork with their pitchforks and attack anything that is new and creative and exciting?
So I've written about this many times, and you could blame social media. It used to be this wonderful way to share ideas, and now it's a way to show you're unemployed and you have too much time on your hands. The Cracker Barrel thing made no sense to me because there was nothing offensive about it. There was nothing that's, hey, we're going to get rid of the guy who probably 100 years ago was responsible for some lynchings, and we're just going to replace him with a barrel because we know that you love our chicken and dumplings and stuff. The greatest example I can show you, and if you look at Cracker Barrel, they made a huge mistake by bowing to pressure, and the Gap bowed to pressure and all these things. My favorite example of this is American Eagle and the Sydney Sweeney campaign. There was her whole, I've got great genes and whatever, and people are like, oh my God, that's a thinly veiled Nazi reference and things like that. This is a great article if you want to find it and read it. It's so valuable. The guy who owns American Eagle is like a pretty observant Jewish family, and he's older. He doesn't really pay a lot of attention to social media. All of his senior executives were going out of their mind about the backlash, and they're saying, we've got to kill this. We've got to pretend we've never spoken to Sydney Sweeney. We've got to pull all the ads. And he goes, I don't understand all this social media stuff. I'm not a young person. He goes, I believe in this campaign. I think it's going to do well for us. Let's not blink for 45 days. And in 45 days, let's look at the numbers and see, was this a hit or a miss? And they found after 45 days, the conversation didn't really die down, but their foot traffic to the stores increased, their revenue increased. They couldn't keep product on the shelves. and they're getting a gazillion dollars worth of people talking about them. And the difference was, and I don't know if I coined this term. I kind of hope I did because I don't hear people use it, and I've been using
Just
it for
own it.
years. But there's customers and there's costumers. And costumers are people that aren't customers, so they're just costing you money. And then there's customers that actually love you and give you money. And like the owner of American Eagle said, let's worry about the people who love us and not worry about all these like unemployed designers and unemployed marketing people who have way too much time to blog and create YouTube videos when in fact they're just helping us drive people to the store, because the people who love us, like they don't think we're Nazis. They don't think that we're just selling jeans here, people. Like it's a sort of thing. And I love the fact that they didn't back down. They actually used data to think, but it wasn't 24-hour data. It was 45-day data and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like we live in a crazy time. I've had people attack me and like whatever all the time, and I don't let it bother me. Sure, it probably hurts. Like someone will see it a year or two later and say we can't work with that guy or whatever, but it's hopefully people are smart enough to look at the source and look at the context and stuff like that. But it's like, I've also said this many times, a logo does not make your business. It's like, I shouldn't care less that the Gap changed the logo. What I care about is, do the jeans last and are they comfortable? Do they fit me well? And is the price something I'm okay with? Let's call yourself whatever company you want. Change your colors. These things aren't going to change my life one bit. I'm not sure how like we've gotten to the point where it's completely okay to just criticize people's really hard work just because like you didn't like the fact that it's a rounded font or something like that.
I think it's everywhere too. It's not just creative work. The only thing that seems to sell better than sex is anger. And I've actually experienced this myself. I don't ever have like content that gets so popular that you could call it viral. But if it crests over a certain hidden threshold, people come out of the woodworks and hate on it. It's almost like they begrudge the success of a single video. Or I follow a lot of, I don't even want to call them fitness influencers, but people who are maybe they're on a weight loss journey or a fitness transformation journey or something. And they're incredibly inspiring people who have to deal with just tons of hate simply because they're guilty of the sin of being inspiring.
Have you seen that guy? There's this dude, he's 5,500 pounds. His name's Will. I can't think of his last name, but he's always in fast food places without his shirt on. He's a heavy guy. And he's always, this is what I used to eat when I was 600 pounds. And I don't know if he's still eating it or not, because they don't show him eating or anything. But there was a video that came out, like somebody caught him on video ordering like $50 worth of food at a fast food place. And he's, come on, man, can't you just give me the food for free? I'm going to make a video here. And it just looked like really not cool.
But I haven't seen that guy, but I have seen a lot of other people that I'm entertained as much by the stories as crazy reactions they get sometimes.
Right. It's amazing. And I don't know why people think that it's okay to say some of the things they say or the memes they post. And there's this guy, it's the weirdest Instagram account I've ever seen. I don't follow them, but it keeps coming up in my For You page. It's like a guy in his 30s who's in pretty good shape. Looks like a boxer, like athletic guy. And he's got these two kids and he fake punches them in the face. They fall down. And like they're on the ground and they go, I love you, baby. And I'm like, and I'm always just, it's domestic assault tied with an inspirational message. But if you go into the comments, and these kids, like the guy's in great shape, the kids are a little heavy. And everybody posts this picture from Rick and Morty where this kid gets punched in the face and then his own breasts hit him in the face too. And I'm just like, what? This is a kid. Like, why are you posting these things? He's going to grow up scarred.
Yeah. It's a weird time that we live in. And actually, I asked a similar question to a lot of the people who've been on my podcast or the previous iteration of it recently, where it was like,
Do you remember a time when we had such hope for social media? There was this hope, I think is the best word. There was just like this glow, and it just seemed so wonderful and democratic, and it was going to be the way of the future. And isn't it lovely that there is such a thing as self-publishing, because now everybody has a voice. And like, how naive were we to not realize that giving everybody a voice might not necessarily be the best thing, especially when it can be anonymized. And I just closed loop. I don't really necessarily have a question, but I will say one of my favorite forms of content on social media right now
Is
is
mine.
when people call out the shitty behavior of people who do asshole comments or DMs or something, and they kind of flip the switch, or find this racist. Here's the city.
Yeah.
Here's the video. Call them out, and then those people actually face consequences for being terrible people and thinking that the quote unquote anonymity of the internet will protect them.
Social media has been weaponized, and sometimes it's used for good, but I'd say the majority of times it's used for bad. Without getting into politics or anything like that, but like the October 7th and Israel getting attacked and everything, the same day bombs were dropping, there was a coordinated social media effort to spread one side of the message as opposed to a balanced message. And it's crazy how social media now, even going back to the boys, there was a whole storyline on how they're using propaganda and social media manipulation to basically bend people's wills. It's 100% been weaponized for politics, for anything you can imagine, elections, just about anything.
It is somewhat disheartening. Misinformation and
Does it
almost
drive you crazy? Maybe this is just my insecurity. I'll write something that I really feel is really great and everyone should read, and I post it on LinkedIn, and 10% of my followers actually see it. And then you'll just see somebody post something like, I don't know, anything. Like
Claude output that has 30 AI comments below it, and it gets 20,000 impressions.
Yeah.
And yes, nothing, professionally at least, presently, pisses me off. I heard a great quote the other day. It was somebody leaving a comment on somebody else's content where they said exactly that. They said, I'm going to admit that I copy and pasted from Claude, and it was one of my best performing posts. And yes, there was a bunch of AI written comments, but take that for what it is. And a guy left a comment below, and he said, I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, but it was something to the effect of, impressions on a post is not the same as the impression you make. And
that's cool.
For the business that I'm in, that's the message I want people to understand, is that if you're authentically yourself with a true message that came from your own gray matter, and you connect with even one or two people, you're still way ahead of the version of yourself that publishes AI slop that an AI algorithm happens to decide is popular and then get AI comments and everything else. And it's the same with now that we're getting into it, those people who are very obviously using AI comments on LinkedIn, I just want to wave a flag and help them understand that it's not helping your reputation at all. It's doing exactly the opposite. You sound not just sycophantic, but lazy. You've said nothing. One comes along and says that you're poignant. So what's the upside for you here?
Yeah.
Anyway, I do feel like we should talk about the AI thing a little bit, though.
Sure.
Because everything, I was at a networking event the other day, which is very rare for me to leave the house, but invariably the entire conversation ends up being about AI. It's everywhere. It's the elephant in the room. It is affecting everything we touch, in particular for people like you and I, who probably pride themselves on being creative and having original ideas. And it's threatening to level the playing field a little bit, but it isn't necessarily. It's really just adding volume of more crap. Now, I say this as somebody who's totally pro AI as far as various ways of improving workflow and whatever else. but I do not accept AI as a proxy for original thought.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I was at the beginning, I was anti-AI everything, and now I'm just anti-AI for creative purposes. I see people letting them write their books. I see people starting whole businesses based on just creating really not very good photos and images and stuff like that. I'm warming up to AI, but I'm still deathly terrified of it because while I don't think it's going to replace everybody, and that's why I think it's so important to be a specialist, not a generalist. I do think AI will replace a lot of generalists. I think you have to really own something and be really great at one or two things. You're not going to be able to be the guy every year that just rides the trend and says, now I'm the leader in Clubhouse, and then I'm the leader of Second Life, and I'm the leader of Google Plus, and every time these things die, you're the leader in whatever the next thing is. You're gonna have to find something that's a little evergreen and really own it and stuff like that. But at the same time, I look at the promise of AI, which I don't believe has been realized yet, and executives just making mass firings based on the promise. We're talking 50, 60, 70,000 jobs that have been let go probably just this calendar year from tech companies because they believe that AI can just replace a whole category of people. And that's very scary to me because it'll grind the economy to a halt if, God forbid, anybody fails. I'm the least fan of Elon Musk there is in the world, but it's scary to me to think that if he were to be rendered bankrupt or something, that he could bring the whole world down with him and stuff like that. And it's just, we've gone too fast into this thing without really understanding the whole picture. And when I hear that, and this is about a 6-month-old stat, so it could even be like more for all I know, but it costs about $700 million a day to run OpenAI between salaries and the business operations, but just keeping the data centers open and all the water they're using and all the cooling they're using and all that stuff. I don't see how that's sustainable. It's crazy to me. And if you're nowhere near profitable, that means you got to just keep raising money and raising money and raising money. And there'll be one winner at the end of this. And yeah, I don't get it. There's been tons of other things that have never lived up to their promise. So we talk about augmented reality was a thing for a couple years, and we talk about programmatic marketing and all these things that have come and gone. I think this is here to stay, but we really need more human steering the ship than AI becoming this behemoth all-encompassing being.
Are we in a period right now of correction where that's concerned, though? I do think that there's a line between engineering and creativity. And an example is Anthropic has dozens of jobs for copywriters and philosophers and all of these thinking positions, knowledge work that is separate again from, like you said, the 50,000 layoffs that have happened in engineering and jobs like that.
Are these long-term jobs, or are these let's suck everything we can out of these people to train the system so they're no longer needed? I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't answer that question either. We just see the job listings and maybe it's because it feeds a certain narrative about the fact that there is still value in the human in the loop.
Anthropic also, like, they released I don't think they've released it. They created a new version of Claude that they said is so dangerous, they're not comfortable releasing it because it could pretty much like hack any like website that's available like anywhere, and they can go past firewalls and stuff like that. And you hear, hey, we've created something that's too dangerous to share with you, so we're just going to keep it for ourselves, not we're going to destroy this thing. Yeah. It's never like we're going to put it back in the box. It's just we're going to keep it for ourselves. You know?
Are they, I forget, are they the ones that did sign the government contract, or are they the ones that said they wouldn't? I forget.
They're the ones that the government said we won't work with you and stuff like that. So they're trying to appeal it and stuff like that. But I've never heard a company say, we just built something that we can't control.
Yeah.
Sleep well at night.
And another thing I think that they've admitted to as well is that the new versions of Anthropic are in large part written by Anthropic. Like
Yeah.
the machine is creating itself. And
Mhm.
it's really easy to get sucked into the doomsday scenarios and the hype cycles around, I just replaced my entire marketing team with 10 AI agents. First of all, I don't believe any of those stories. I think that's just
I
a
believe
really
it's
good LinkedIn
happening.
mark.
I just don't think the output.
I know that there's layoffs happening. And I know that there is such a thing as building an agent that does a job, but I just replaced my entire marketing team with AI agents is a yarn. It's
Mhm. I read,
and
I
it-
don't know if this
and
is true or not, but I read that Mark Zuckerberg built an AI agent to help him run Facebook. I'm not making a joke. Like I don't know if it's fact,
yeah,
but I have read that.
we could probably talk all day, but I have a couple more questions that I'd like to cover. One is, and we can plug the book here, but let's assume that somebody is writing the biography of Saul Colt. What's in the last chapter?
The last chapter is I taught 1 million people to be more creative. That's what I'd like to be known for. I taught 1 million people to take chances with their personalities, their personal brand, and their businesses, because that would make me the happiest thing.
The name of
Nothing.
your book is The Only Creative Process That Matters. I have to admit that I've got about the first quarter of it read. I can see the 25% on my e-reader. So I got to get back to it. But
You like the
tell us-
first quarter?
I did, yes. I
That's
enjoyed it
good.
immensely. And actually, I told myself I'd try to get more, so I had a bigger number to tell you before I sat down for this interview. But life. Tell us why we should buy the book.
So, like, I wrote the book because I got tired of people treating creativity like it's magic or it's only reserved for a few people. I think that there are obviously, like I said, I believe that I have some little gift, but that gift could be that I just trained myself to be more creative. It's like I'm inspired by everything, but I don't wait for inspiration. And people overthink ideas, they kill ideas too early. The book completely has a system to expand thinking and vet your ideas. So you don't have to kill ideas too early if they pass like the sniff test. Creativity, I think most people think creativity is about having one great idea, but it's really about having enough ideas to find the great idea. And that's why volume creates quality. Confidence comes from reps. The advice I give to younger marketers or whatever is make more things, ship things faster, don't wait for permission, create a ton of smaller things, less big budget things, and get them out into the world. Like I always love to be told that we don't have a gazillion-dollar budget because that means I can be hyper creative. I can take better risks. The thing that and the other thing I tell people is your job isn't to be right. Your job is to create something worth reacting to. That's like what you said earlier about the engage, that quote and everything. It's you got to create something worth worth reacting to and stuff like that. And it's like most marketers aren't bad at marketing. I think people are good at marketing. If there's one thing I'd say, I don't know if we're actually making marketers anymore. We're making tool experts, like a HubSpot expert or a Salesforce expert. But I think marketers aren't bad at marketing. They're just afraid to make something people may actually judge, like that Cracker Barrel or whatever, because it's like we live in a very reactionary time, but reaction is good when you use it for yourself and not for bad.
I love that advice of just create more things and put more things out there. It reminds me of there's a story Jack White tells about how he came up with the riff for Seven Nation Army, and he played it for his friend, and he was like, "Is this something?" And his friend was like, no." And now it's one of the most iconic riffs of all time, and probably the most popular football chant. You just never know, kids. You know what your good ideas are until you give them an audience. So is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have?
I don't know. There's lots of things. I could go on for another hour. I have to go to the washroom and I'm hungry, but so we won't go
I'm
on for
hungry
another
too.
hour.
I'm hungry too.
Huh. But
We're at 80 minutes. This is my longest podcast recording ever, and there hasn't been a moment where I haven't been completely fascinated.
cool. I'll say one more thing, and this is another thing that I learned along the way, and so we can wrap up with a little education nugget as well. But most brands don't understand what business they're actually in. And I think that this is another lesson that I learned early, and I try to explain to people all the time. Like I tell people, are you a tech business or are you a media company? Are you in the product business or the attention business? Because if no one knows you exist, you don't have a product problem. You have an awareness problem. I tell people a coffee shop isn't selling coffee. They're selling the reason to choose them, the reason to stop on your way to work, the reason you open your laptop in their couches. A software company isn't selling features. It's selling relief. It's selling time. It's selling identity. So the real question should be, why would anyone choose you over the 50 other options they already ignore? And that's a huge eye opener for a lot of people when you're brainstorming or coming up with plans and stuff like that.
That's excellent advice, and I can't help but think of all the ways I can apply it to my own business. And so I'm going to pace my living room and have some showers and some shits thinking about exactly that.
What do you think it is about expanding your colon that sparks so much thoughtfulness?
Less about the colon expansion. I think maybe it's the absence of thought. And it's a terrific question, actually. And I think I come up with really good ideas sometimes when I'm out on my bike as well, because you're not trying, I think. It's when like inspiration chooses its own path as opposed to, now granted, I know what you're saying, which is sit down, put in the reps, throw spaghetti at the wall, come up with 100 ideas, find the 3 or 4 good ones. But and it's a terrific process, but I find that just as often the really good ideas, maybe the 3 or 4 of the 100, come when you least expect it.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
I'm
cool.
always open to that. I make that joke a lot. I'll say, oh, I got to pace my living room, or I'm going to take a couple showers and shit on it.
I thought the joke was open because you're open to.
Sorry, I keep talking about my colon. Listen.
Uh,
Saul, thank you very much. Obviously, not just for appearing on the show, but also for being a bit of a confidant and helping me get to the point where I was ready to do this again. I'm incredibly grateful for your advice and for your time. It is not lost on me that I'm talking to the smartest man in the world, the best word-of-mouth marketer in the world. Yeah, I'm extremely grateful. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. We've known each other. It's got to be a decade at this point. So it's
more. I think I'm trying to think back, and we're opening it back up again. Was there also a FreshBooks promotion where you were cooking bacon at South by Southwest?
FreshBooks did do that. That was the year I was at Rogers. That was headed up by Sunir Shah. I never take credit for things I wasn't a part of, but it was a very successful promotion, and Sunir killed it.
I do think the first time we ever met in person, though, was in Austin. And
I was there that year. It just wasn't part of FreshBooks. So
but I remember I was there with Stretta, and I was handing out stickers. I think that was 2008. 2010, I went back with a camera and a team. But I met you in 2008. It was like the very dawn of Twitter. And I remember we were probably connected on social media and knew each other a little bit beforehand. But what your impression upon me was that you had, in the dark of night, had gone and put flyers underneath the door of everybody staying in your hotel.
Yeah.
And I thought, why didn't I think of that? It is such a simple idea, but also so effective. It's what we these days would call the pattern interrupt or the pattern disrupt, right? Everybody's got the swag bag full of stickers and flyers and everything else, and it's in the corner of the hotel room. But what's this on the floor? As I return, I was a Saul fan ever since.
Very cool. It's always nice to connect. And please don't hesitate to reach out for any reason.
I'm going to probably, call you on that then. We're going to have another one of these. Thanks a lot,
Awesome.
Saul.
Okay, thank you.